Good afternoon and welcome to UnitedTV. Today is October 25th, 2024. My name is Kemal Erkan. I'm here with Sean Dunnigan. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Kemal. How are you?
Good. We have a lot of new updates from different topics, and we are going to have a guest speaker. Dr. Mike Katz is going to join us. Dr. Katz actually is on the road, and we told him we give him the flexibility of whenever he has time between 2 and 2:45, he should be joining us. So we are going to start our regular topics, and then as soon as I have him, I'm going to let him in, and then we'll start the discussion for his Senate race and see how he does so far. One of the things that's really important for him and for people to know is that he actually is not doing any fundraisings. So he's doing it fully with his own funds. And I am kind of curious to see where he is with his campaign and what he's expecting. And then we are going to find out those answers from him when he joins us. Now, our first topic is BRICS. So we kind of own BRICS in a way that we brought this up first, so before this was on anyone else's agenda.
On it, yeah, it's years ago.
Yeah, so therefore we have a big pile of stuff that we did for our studies in the last 2.5 years. Now, BRICS is taking a different turn. Turkey actually is bidding on joining BRICS, and in fact, they were in the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia. And along with Russia, China, and India, and other countries, they were all there. Now, this is actually bringing Turkey another one more inch closer to the new alliance. Now, right after this, as this was happening, the summit was happening, there were some terrorist attacks directly targeting Turkish military. And this also raises so many questions. What's the motivation of this attack? Is it motivated from west, or is it motivated from east, or is it just one of those random PKK attacks? So all those will probably have an answer in the future, but today we don't know. Right. So we are going to discuss this a little bit and go from there.
So yeah, as you mentioned, BRICS we've been covering for quite a bit of time now, so over 2 years. This is, you could say, in its early stages when we first started covering it, but not really, because it's actually been around since the mid to late 2000s. On the actual inception of the idea of having that alternate global currency standard. So just obviously from our standpoint in the US, it's something to pay attention to with that global trade on which currency is actually being used, and the impact that various countries switching from the US dollar as the standard to an alternative currency would actually have on, obviously, us nationally, but also that trickle-down effect on the impact of our own dollar that you can see on our day-to-day life. We did kind of cover that a little bit on some of the expenses that would go up on a more, I guess you could say, local standpoint, but obviously the big picture here is where the bulk of the coverage would be concerned regarding. So with BRICS, like you said, Turkey is now the next country to potentially join. So they do have their application with BRICS. I think it's interesting to see which countries are actually going out of their way to apply to BRICS and which ones also been invited, so vice versa, whether they're the ones instigating the potential partnership or if it's an invitation from that coalition. So Turkey, obviously, key geographic factor, population size, a very big player in this game, I would say. So definitely something for us to keep our eyes on going forward here.
So Dr. Katz actually is on our line, on the Zoom line. So he's on the road, so he'll be probably in his car. So we talk about it. He's not going to be, he promised me that he's not going to drive while he's with us. So we want to make sure that he's safe. So I'm going to go ahead and let him in. So that way we can do this part and then come back to the BRICS discussion.
I'm gonna hop off and then we'll get Dr. Katz in here.
All right, thank you. While Dr. Katz is signing up, as he joined us before, I believe end of last year, he was with us, and he is someone who brings a wealth of experience from healthcare field and the perspective of the politics from a physician standpoint. We do value his opinion, especially when we look at the number of years he spent in the healthcare field, but also not just he's a physician, but he's a family guy with being a dad, having 3 kids, being a husband. So all those, and he's actually doing a very challenging campaign by not doing any fundraisings and trying to do this big important challenge on his own. And we asked him to join us to give us updates from his campaign and where he is. Dr. Katz, how are you doing?
Hey, good afternoon, Kemal. It's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So we have only 10 days left to the elections. Things are kind of shaping up. You didn't have to go to the primary elections since you are independent, right?
Correct. Yeah,
So,
I'm the 2024 independent nominee for U.S. Senate. So as a minor party member, we're nominated within our party. And in fact, there were no primaries for U.S. Senate this year for the in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. They were essentially anointed by the parties themselves.
so Dr. Katz, one thing that I would like to kind of bring up with the primaries, one of the concerning things that I have seen is the turnout. And I specifically checked, we usually have lower turnouts anyway as a country, even for the main elections. It's never really high. Like, as you know, the country that I was born and raised in Turkey, the turnout can go up to 92%. In fact, in their last election, they were at 86, and they were blaming the turnout. So the 86 is a really low number for them. That would be a dream for us here. And in this one, what was interesting to me was in 2020, it was 32%, and now it's down to 20% for people to show up for the primary election. Do you see any concerns with that? Do you think that's going to reflect also for the main elections? There will be less people are going to go and vote. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I can tell you the 2 issues: the primary elections and the general election. It's unfortunate that there is a low voter turnout in the primary elections. In Delaware specifically, we do have some challenges because we have closed primaries. So we lose about 1/3 of the voters in Delaware primaries because they are not registered as a Democrat or a Republican. And you can only vote in the primaries if you are a registered Democrat or Republican. And in fact, in the general election, which we are now already beginning, about 2/3 of Delaware voters vote as independents. They vote on the candidate that they think is most qualified. But in the primary, it's a challenge and it's a problem. And it's not only because of the closed primaries in Delaware, but also because I think our educational systems don't really teach our kids civics, and it's not a focus in our schools, the importance of our democratic process and our republic. So it's multifactorial. A lot of issues that impact over time the low voter turnout in the primaries.
See, now since the last time we have seen you, and this is all honest. I want you to do well, but I also know that you're going to have a lot of challenges. But especially when the money is a factor in this, because your opponents raised almost $9 million. That enables them to do a lot of things, and a lot of people, unfortunately, again, it's kind of sad. They don't necessarily do all their due diligence, and they just see someone on TV and they go with whatever they see. They don't even kind of validate, verify. There's no checks and balance. So this is kind of like dangerous for these types of situations. So now you having not only going against Democrats, but also for Republicans. I would like to know how you are doing so far and then what you are expecting from next week's elections.
Well, there are a couple issues in that. First of all, actually, voting began today at 11 a.m. in Delaware. We have early voting that starts today, goes all the way through November 3rd. There's a day off for the general election to be set up on November 5th. But we're actually doing very well. There are a couple issues that I'll get back to as far as our decision not to raise any funds. But we actually just have our data shows that actually we're locked in a dead heat, a statistical dead heat with Lisa Blunt Rochester right now with a 2.91% margin of error. So we're actually doing very well. The most Delawareans at this point are really just essentially exhausted by all of the hate up and down the state. We've heard that for months now. The Democratic and Republican parties want us to essentially hate each other so that they can divide us and keep their power. And the bottom line is the American political system, it's broken. It's grounded on tribal politics, money, and the core value of winning. And the Democratic and Republican parties are really, I believe, and many Delawareans believe, are the root cause of our divisive and dysfunctional government. So we're actually doing very well. We've had a really good grassroots campaign. I mentioned that we refuse to accept any donations. As an independent, I'm working to eradicate the influence of money and corruption in our government. Because we're not raising money, we are a completely volunteer, citizen-driven grassroots campaign that's working to put citizens back in charge of our government. And we've had a really good response with that. It's really citizens have literally come out of the woodwork, and we have built over the past several months a grassroots army, and it's really energized, and we're doing very well, and we're peaking right at the right time.
Now, Dr. Katz, do you feel like I know you are independent, but if you were to support one of them, are you closer to the Democrats more than the Republicans, or is it the other way around?
And that's people try to, and that's really by design with the Republican and Democratic parties. They want to divide us, so it's very tribal. They want us to be, you're either with us or against us. And my feeling is we're all on the same team. We're all Americans. We're all Delawareans. And the job of a U.S. senator is a very serious, complex, and important job. And we need to make sure that we are electing strong, independent leaders who are able to critically think to solve the serious problems our country faces. And we have a leadership crisis in Congress. So as an independent, I'm working to change our political system from political governance by politicians, to governance by servant leaders, leaders who step forward to serve, placing people above party, service above self. And servant leaders also abide by a code of conduct grounded on our foundational principles of our Constitution: liberty, justice, and equality for all. And we also abide by a behavioral code of conduct in which we recognize our common humanity, where we're respectful of each other, we work for and seek unity, and we work together with all Americans to solve problems. So my feeling is, and not only my significant executive experience in the healthcare industry, but in business, and I also served in the Delaware State Senate and have significant experience going back into the 90s, work on state and federal policy. So my feeling is we're all Americans. We should be stepping up to serve and solve the serious problems we have. So I don't look at party. I just look at how we bring people together to solve the problems our community and our nation faces.
That's fair. Thank you for that. So I agree with most of what you say, because problem is when you look at financial issues, you can be on the Republican side a little bit more. I'm speaking for myself. So, but when it's the social issues, then we are more on the Democratic side. So then you really don't have to be one, because you can't, because you still have the feelings on these issues, opinions on these issues, and also when it comes to social problems. Like our office now is in downtown Wilmington, and we kind of have a little bit different experience with the homeless population in the city of Wilmington. And when you see that problem, you can you can't help but see what can be done from the welfare standpoint to keep those individuals off street, so then they can actually have safe shelters. And some of them, they actually in front of us, they do drugs. I mean, I have a video of one between the two buildings. The guy is injecting himself on the street. So those are kind of like the issues that we see. But what's the most pressing problem that you would kind of handle first if elected after November 5th, November 6th?
So there are two categories of issues. The first ones are structural, and then the policy issues. With respect to structural issues, the first thing I'll be introducing, it's already drafted, is term limits. The reason for that is I believe that serving in Congress, the U.S. Senate, is a form of service. Many people step into, once elected, they create a career out of being in the U.S. Senate or Congress and build enormous wealth. So I believe in term limits. I will be introducing that. And I actually introduced that in the state Senate when I was serving in Delaware State Senate several years ago. The second structural issue deals with an overhaul of our federal government, looking at the operational efficiencies and making sure that we streamline our federal government, prioritizing the services that we need to provide, and making sure that we're doing things more efficiently, lower cost, higher quality. With respect to policy, there are three pillars to my policy. The first one is economy, jobs, cost of living. That's one. The second is healthcare, and the third is education. We have problems in all three of those pillars. They're all interconnected. So to solve one problem involves the other issues. And you bring up an issue of drug problems. That's in healthcare, we deal with patient care and solving, as a physician, solving upstream root cause problems of patients. We don't, just treat symptoms. We want to get the root cause of the disease. So when we look at, for instance, issues with drug abuse, that is very complex issues. It's a downstream issue due to socioeconomic issues, education, mental health. And so there are a lot of things that we have to deal with that. Also deals with education. So a lot of the social issues, I believe we need to not only address the acute issues we're dealing with now that society has failed to prevent, but also work upstream and making sure we're solving the issues and making sure we're having healthy pregnancies, healthy babies, and making sure that those children are able to have early childhood education starting within the first weeks or months of birth. Because if you wait to 3 or 4 years, when they're 3 or 4 years old, you've already missed that critical period of time. And as a pediatric critical care anesthesiologist, I know that the first 2 years are critical with a lot of rapid brain development and neurodevelopment in children. So we can't miss that opportunity in making sure the kids have healthy diets, deals with living in safe homes, public safety and so forth. So it's all interconnected. With respect to the issues, I have these things ready to roll. I think Delaware is a perfect place to initiate or to launch these programs with education, healthcare reform, and also economic changes that can help people benefit from the opportunity to work and to be able to advance themselves economically.
So I will go back to the term limit issue. Now, we have a term limit for presidency. We have a term limit for governor and a lot of other state level positions. Why do you think we don't have, what's the motivation that we never had a term limit for the Senate?
Well, I can tell you my experience in the state Senate and trying to get this introduced. Could not get support or enough support in the Republican or the Democratic Party. And the reason why is because politicians, they get in, they like the power, they want to build a career and have a career. They have enormous lifelong benefits, which need to be eliminated. And it's because they want to maintain their power and control. And it also gets to the corruption of the Democratic and Republican parties, that they want to insert their people into the offices and keep them there because that's how they keep control. And what many people don't realize, the Democratic and Republican parties are actually corporations. There's a case that was done in 2017 in Florida, a lawsuit brought by Bernie Sanders supporters against the DNC, which was eventually dismissed by the Florida judge, and the case dealt with how Bernie Sanders was treated in the primary, and the judge basically said that the DNC and also the RNC, they're private corporations. They don't have any obligation to protect the voters' rights. In fact, they don't represent the voters. They represent their corporation, and they don't have to follow any rules except the ones that they want.
So one of the arguments that I have with this limit, the term limit, in some cases when they are in the position, of course, there are a lot of exceptions. I would just put that out there first, but I can see maybe 70% of the time, someone actually can become better and better in those positions, because it does require a lot of familiarities to the issues, understanding how government works. But of course, now with the 6 years for the Senate, and then that's if they do 2 terms, that's 12 years. Can they still do another 6 more years and then be dynamic and up to date with everything? I guess, that can be challenging, although there are some benefits of them being able to maintain the knowledge. But I do, again, so probably because you being independent, it helps me a little bit more. So I'm kind of like in the middle on this. So there isn't one way that I have to go with, but if it was given to me, if I had a choice, I think the 2 would be a good 2 term would be a good limit.
Well, I agree with you. And my model has the U.S. Senate at 12 years, which is 2 terms, and then 12 years for the House, which is 6 2-year terms. And if you look at private corporations and industry, you really don't want senior leadership to be there for years and years. It's usually there's turnover 8-10 years in that range. But hold on. Someone's trying to talk to me. I'm actually out by one of the polls right now. Hold on one sec. I apologize. Yes, ma'am. I'm on a call right now. You okay? I'm just looking for the polling. The polling is right at that building, straight that direction. That way. No, left, straight ahead. If you walk that direction, you'll see the signs. Thank you. Sorry about that, Kemal.
This is good. So they can see exactly what you are doing. You are working right now, for example.
So it's really you need to have turnover, and quite frankly, serving in a legislative role is not complex. The role of a legislator is to set policy that sets direction and to bring experts in to help guide the goals and objectives you want to accomplish. But we do need critical thinking people that know how to work with people with different skill sets and essentially be CEOs in a role where you're bringing different people, with expertise and understanding how to manage them, just as we do in healthcare. As an anesthesiologist, when I bring a patient into the operating room that has a lot of critical diseases with cardiac issues or pulmonary or renal issues, we bring in consults, other physicians that have expertise in those areas. So legislators need to understand how to bring the experts in to help set direction to accomplish goals and objectives, not tell people how to do it, but get the experts in to figure out how to meet the goals and objectives.
I like that analogy of medical approach, because in medicine, this is our field. So we have in United Medical ACO, we have almost 22 different specialties. And one of the things that we try to do is everyone knows where they should be stopping. So then better help the patient. We engage other specialties, whoever is needed. So if someone's, diabetes A1C is not controlled, it's time to bring the endocrinology in. Hypertension, the same thing. But in medicine, it's so well defined. So you kind of know when to bring those people in. But in politics, unfortunately, those lines are not well defined. So that's making it very difficult. But if we can do that, if we can bring the most expertise in their areas, most knowledgeable people to work with, that would be a lot better. So I have a different question, and we didn't give you questions. I told you that we are going to stay on the general election topics. But one thing that kind of it's easier to ask me this question to you directly rather than like Lisa, because she has a horse in the race on this one.
Mhm.
But this is bothering me, and I'm going to ask you so because we should be able to discuss. And when I didn't have guests, I did discuss it with Sean a couple of times. As you know, he's in the room with me here in the studio. So when we talk about democracy and how important for people to have choices, but at the same time, what just happened from the Democrat standpoint, we have a president who was going to run for the election, and very late in the game, he backed out, and it didn't give any choice other than Kamala Harris for those individuals who are going to vote for the Democratic Party. And in fact, we did a survey in January 2024, and for the Democrats, if Joe Biden was not running, who would be the number one favorite person? It was Michelle Obama, and Kamala Harris was the fourth one out of the four. The California governor, Gavin Newsom, was number two. And now all of a sudden you have no choice as a person who may be supporting that party. And this is from the democratic standpoint, democracy standpoint, this is a huge problem. What's your opinion on this?
Well, you brought up the perfect example of what I mentioned earlier about the Bernie Sanders case and how the DNC and RNC are corporations. They do not represent the voters. They only represent the people that are in control of the party and the money behind the party. So, and this is nothing to say about any of the candidates, but it's not a democratic process. And that the DNC essentially took away the power of the voters. And that's wrong. It's not democratic, and it's a real symptom of how broken our political system is. And that's why I'm an independent. John Adams said one of his biggest concerns in 1780, almost 250 years ago, was the division of the republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader and concerting measures in opposition to each other. And that's the place we find ourselves now as a country. And it's really put our democratic process and our republic at risk. And that's one of the major reasons why I entered this race. Is not only did I not see a qualified candidate to serve in the U.S. Senate, I believe I'm the only qualified candidate to serve in the U.S. Senate, but the fact that the erosion of our democratic process and the direction of our country. So it's more about stepping up in an obligation and a sense of urgency to serve, because this is really not necessarily about our generation, but our kids' generations, grandkids, and about our country. So very concerned. And that's one of the primary reasons why I chose to enter this race. And that's why we're getting so much support. And we are, as I said, a statistical dead heat with Lisa right now. And that we're getting so much support statewide. We are pulling people from, and I don't like to use, party terminology because it's divisive, but we are pulling people that consider themselves hard R's to hard D's, independents, and everything in between, and from all demographics. So we're very excited about it. We're very energized, and quite frankly, because we have such a, it's all volunteer grassroots campaign. We have people up and down the state committing their own time, and it's quite frankly inspiring.
Oh, that's good to hear from your side. And I know you may have time limitation there, so you can let me know when it's time, when time's up. This was I do appreciate having this interview kind of like last minute, so I want to be respectful to your time. Now, one of the things that you mentioned with the economy being number one most challenging issue, most pressing issue for us. I also want to kind of point out the issue of global currency, US dollar being the global currency, and which actually brings a different responsibility. And sometimes guys make fun of me when I say great power comes with great responsibilities. So when we have that leverage and how we use that, is important. So if the financial sanctions on countries just based on our local politics here, just because it doesn't align with us, it doesn't mean that we can actually put sanctions on these countries. And now what we see is BRICS taking the center stage. They just had their summit in Kazan, Russia, and which is one of our topics that we are covering. And Sean and we started talking about this 2.5 years ago as the currency issue, just to kind of educate people on what global currency means for us. Because it makes us very special in a way that there are some countries who are not in charge of the currency. They cannot afford certain mistakes, but we can because the money comes from us. So, but to a point, right? So it has a limit. So if it's overused, just like everything else, it can become a problem. And I personally see this becoming a big future challenge for US and BRICS taking, more and more territories. Just like recently, Turkey is joining BRICS as a full-time member, and there are so many other countries. Almost 45% of the world population already is being represented. So, what do you think on the global currency on our economic policy issues?
Well, as you said, with great power comes great responsibility. And we are very fortunate in this country to live in a republic with democratic processes, which are broken right now. But the currency and my business background is actually international executive MBA. So I've got a very strong background, not only in the business of America, but international business and understanding how they interact and integrate. And the US dollar, the fact that BRICS is even not only just gained some traction, but the amount of traction that it has really is a failure of our national leadership. We have failed to step up and to assert our influence and also to address the concerns of other countries around the world. So this is something that is top of mind, top priority. We need to have not only a strong American economic system, but we need to use that responsibility nationally or internationally so that we can help other countries grow in democratic processes, deals with how humans are treated around the world. And by maintaining that influence of the US dollar gives us more influence around the world, and ultimately to be able to help preserve human rights around the world, help those countries that are failing in human rights, and also be able to use that influence politically to help keep the world safer and hopefully to avoid wars. And part of the reason why we see the world erupting in flames is because of this lack of leadership in the US.
A lot of mistakes probably were made already, which will make it very difficult to reverse at this point. So that's when we brought this up, and some of my friends were asking, like, why are you even concerned about BRICS? It's nothing's going to happen. I'm like, no, it has a lot of leverage. It has volume. It has, military power. It has population. So what makes us kind of like advance from others, the global currency, controlling the global currency, which allows us to, again, make some mistakes and not to pay for the consequences. But now that is going to change. The national debt being at 35 trillion. And 4 years ago, when we started doing these sessions first time, it was at 25 trillion, right, Sean? So it's already 1/3 up, 10 trillion is up. So nothing is actually going on the positive side. So those are my great concerns. And also living in Turkey for 25 years and knowing inflation, knowing financial issues for people who lived in those conditions. I mean, I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't have to deal with it, but I knew my friends did. So it kind of puts me in an advantage to kind of better analyze the situation that we may be going through in the future and hopefully things won't be worse than where we are right now. Final question for you. Feel free not to answer. So final two questions, quick questions. So House of Cards or West Wing? Which one do you watch?
Sorry, say that again.
The House of Cards or West Wing, the TV shows?
West Wing.
West Wing, all right. So I'm on the House of Cards side, so I think I'm a little bit darker on that. So last question, who do you think is going to be our next president?
I don't know. I can't answer that. The information I have is the data we see on all the different news channels. They all have different perspectives, but my focus is to be successful and win to become Delaware's next and first independent and physician United States senator. Because no matter who is in the Oval Office, no matter how Congress and the Senate play out, Delaware will have a very strong, independent, critical thinker representing them in the United States Senate, and I will be able to work with everybody in the U.S. Senate and Congress. And in fact, one question people usually ask me is, who will I caucus with? As an independent, I'm committed to remaining independent, and I'm actually will be establishing an independent caucus. I've already been in contact with people both in the Senate and the House of Representatives and the representatives. They do have an interest in caucusing with us. And, based on issues or full time, they do not or probably will not change their party affiliation. Some may, but we will be establishing an independent caucus. Therefore, no party will have a majority, and it will require everybody to work together to get the work of the people done. So it will actually place independents and independent-minded people in a very strong position. And whatever administration is there, we will make sure that the work of the people is getting done.
All right, so you do want to answer the question. So let me actually just rephrase the question one more time. Who do you think would be better for us?
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that either, because it's split 50-50. And, it's up to the voters to determine who they feel. And that's the beauty of the democratic process. So, and I'm truly sincere. Whoever's there, I know with my background and experience, I will be able to not only work well with that administration, but will be in a very influential position to get the work done, dealing with the economic problems we have, our broken healthcare and education systems, and dealing especially with issues in Delaware, dealing with veterans issues, first responders, and all those issues dealing with healthcare and education. Delaware is positioned, just because of its size and how close we are as a community. We'll be able to launch these programs right in Delaware to fix the problems with education and healthcare.
Well, Dr. Katz, this was a very enjoyable discussion for me personally.
Thank you.
I do want to wish you best luck. I know it's going to be difficult, but this is Delaware. Everything can happen. Yep. And hopefully your outcome will be positive for you. And I believe we should continue our discussions with you, and because I would be interested in the independent approach to the issues in the state of Delaware as much as possible. And us both being in healthcare field probably will make it more beneficial for what we are trying to do. And again, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Best to you and your family, and hello to Sean as well. Stay well. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
All right, Dr. Mike Katz was with us. His unique approach to tackling Delaware's most pressing issues and his commitment to work beyond party lines have given us a lot of different points to think about. When I was listening to him, I feel like I can kind of support him. So, and I'm not just saying this. So I literally do believe that there are a lot of commonalities and the approach of like you and I, we talk about these things a lot. You don't have to be one on all the way on the other side of the issues. You can be closer to the problems, and your approach can be more pleasing for both parties. And you don't have to be all the way to the left, and you don't have to be all the way to the right. So there's a middle ground, and I think that approach could win in Delaware.
I think that you mentioned Delaware, anything can happen. The state size obviously is crucial in this because it's not like you're in a New York, Texas, California, Florida, where you just have no chance just based on the sheer size of the population that even if you had a strong enough campaign, they would just be muffled out. I think especially too with the turnout, like you're mentioning, that it's not a 94% turnout or anything on that scheme of things. So those who are voting, I think, are at least paying attention to things. That's why they are registered to vote and are out there actively participating in the election. So with those two aspects, state size and voter turnout, I do think it is a strong possibility for especially a state like Delaware to have somebody independent.
It's going to be interesting. So I know we started with the BRICS and Dr. Katz joined us, so we can play our BRICS video. And while that's happening, because we discussed this so many times, and I think we built up from almost nothing for this topic. And today, why this is important is because there's a summit this week in Kazan, Russia. And on the day of this event, there was a terrorist attack in Turkey in the city named Kazan.
Right. Very strong coincidence.
It's very strong, right? So now what I would like to kind of just go over is looking at what Turkey's position is. Turkey is very unique. Most people, they may not understand exactly what Turkey is dealing with on a regular day. Just a country, it's right in the middle. It's almost like being independent, like Dr. Katz. So they're part of Europe and they're part of Asia. They are part of Middle East. And it is an extremely important spot that they are in. Now, here's the background on this issue. They have tried so much to join EU. I'm 50 years old, almost 35 years of my life knowing that discussion and how the EU just showed us a little bit cared and then didn't want to let us in that time. So I know that very well. And after like Cyprus, the south part of Cyprus, Bulgaria, Romania, like those countries who are really actually in worse situation than Turkey is. You cannot even compare like Bulgaria versus Turkey. Like that's not even like one of our cities in Turkey. So, but they are led into the EU. And my opinion on that one is that's kind of like the religious bias. So as a Muslim country, if EU is being called a Christian organization, what's Turkey going to do in there? I can see their point, but they need to be more honest about it. So then instead of saying that, like letting them on, so if you're going to buy me 10 drinks, you know what happens, right? So you can let people on and then lead them on and then not do what you shouldn't let someone buy you 10 drinks because that person is going to have expectation. So if they do, which it happened in the case of Turkey and Europe, so it kind of pushed them to have different approaches on the issues. And they said, okay, look, we are not going to depend on EU. We are not going to depend on Russia. We are not going to depend on anywhere else. We are going to kind of focus on what we have today in our country. This is from the Turkey standpoint. And they kind of focus on what they needed to do, what's best for them. Now they're part of NATO. This is the second biggest military in NATO. But they still can have different positions in different issues. And BRICS is one of them. And you may remember, Sean, 2 years ago when we were talking about the global currency and financial sanctions, one of the things was Turkey's relationship with Iran. And this is their neighbor. And we are telling them, well, from US standpoint, that Iran is not good because they want to have nuclear power. But France has nuclear power, Japan has nuclear power, India has nuclear, Pakistan has nuclear power, but no, we don't want Iran to have it. Okay, but then not only that, you cannot do any trade with them. Okay, fine. then who's gonna compensate the loss of billions of trade, right? Well, you need to kind of figure that out. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
That's why we were talking with Dr. Katz when we were talking about like great power comes with great responsibilities. Here's another one. So you cannot have these two countries not do business because it doesn't work for us 6,000 miles away from where they are. So then they actually start having these independent approaches. And President Erdogan, regardless of what everyone thinks of their domestic policies, he's one of the strongest leaders in the world. So, and with that, we can see the outcome of that. So Turkey has a good seat on almost every table that they are. So like just what we have seen together, we covered the Russia and Ukraine. They were, and then even with Israel, they were. And now they are saying that, okay, enough is enough. So we need to have other options. And we can actually focus on the what's more important for this country. So if we can actually play that other video that we have from the BRICS summit, which then you see how the other problem that I want to kind of point out, in U.S. media here, what we are being told is Russia is alone. Well, Russia is heading that, and then almost half of the world is being represented in that meeting. Russia is hosting that meeting. Putin is hosting that meeting. So, while I don't see a country or the person who's being abandoned by the rest of the world. So that's a lie. So when this is happening, and if people don't understand what this means for us here in the United States, we would be caught off guard with those challenges when it's arrives. So now, with the terrorist attacks, I thought about this and I processed this a little bit more, just so that because everything that we say here today is going to be available in the future. So then we have to be told responsibly. And part of the issue that I see, like everyone is looking at, like, who did this? Like, is it like a Western influence?
Yeah, where to point the finger.
Is it an internal, or is it Russia-China coalition, right? So people should be looking into all these different options. I don't think this is, if you are the first suspect when something happens, you may not be the suspect guilty because then you are easy to blame, right? So right now it's kind of, the place, like the city being Kazan, like Kazan, Turkey, Kazan, Russia, and clearly there's some message. And I immediately when I saw this, I'm like, this is related to BRICS, but I didn't actually have immediate conclusion on who did it, and I still don't know. Yeah. But I think it has something to do with it.
Yeah, I think it'll be the same time frame play out like we saw with the Nord Stream pipeline. Remember that got blown up, and then there's like a month or
they blame Russia right away, right?
Yeah, it was like within at least 6 weeks or so went by before it came out with the actual truth behind it. But I think that's also part of the conversation we had last week regarding the media and how if the attack could have happened, if somebody would have posted something within that first hour or so saying, this is what happened and here's why and here's who to blame, and that got circulated and shared here, and now it's being shared across the US and people see it globally, that could be a false headline, and that wrong message could be out there saying, here's what happened, here's who did it, and I go be mad at them. Whereas I think back in the day, it would take a little bit longer for news to travel. You'd actually get a little bit more truth behind some of these things. Whereas I think, even like you said, in Delaware, we don't have as much of a media presence, but people want to be quick to be the first one to put it out there that we can say, my article on this, so whatever event happened was out first. So you'll get some type of praise or props or credit for that, regardless of how accurate those stories are. So something to consider. Yeah.
So we have other things to discuss, but Dr. Katz was able to join us, so it cut off some of our time, which was fine. So next week, potentially we have Lisa Rochester joining us. It may not be on our regular time, right?
It might be an alternative. I know last time, I think it was on a Thursday morning, she joined, so obviously elections are coming up, so everyone's schedules are much more hectic, hard to find certain time windows, but it may be an alternative time. If not, I'm sure we'll have something at our 2:00.
Well, we have a couple more minutes, and then I know you wanted to ask some questions, not knowing what they are and taking a risk.
Well, I was just gonna ask too, so with the BRICS, kind of going back to that, I'll pull up the video again there. So, like Turkey having its location, you know, with the seas, trade ports, very crucial geographic location. I was wondering, in Turkey, say the workers aren't happy with anything going on, work at those ports, is it common or to ever see like strikes or protests or like unionizing where they're refusing because they're switching to a different paying system? I know one of the strikes that happened here in the US was dock workers that even right here getting paid tremendously higher rates.
Well, the thing is, this is like not having an option is a limiting factor for Turkey. Right? So now having this is gonna give them more freedom.
Motivate them further.
So it's more beneficial for Turkey to have diversity in their trade system.
Yeah.
So no, I don't think unless there are some PKK, group of PKK, they would be protesting. That would be it. But the actual person, Turkish person who loves their country, they know that this is a good thing for us. Just like we are worried about this from our side in the US, right? I'm worried about it. So I'm just telling you that. So because we live here, this is home. But we also have flexibility of putting ourselves in someone else's place to see if we can have empathy and see the issues from their perspective. And that's, that's what we are trying to do. And I'm not necessarily at all supporting what BRICS is doing, but I am explaining why they are
You understand the action plan. Yeah. Sure. If I could ask one other question too related to that. Going back to Dr. Katz's session, we had an interview with him earlier. He was mentioning the term limits and how you were saying that the longer that someone may be in there, they'll actually get more familiarity with the process, understand how things work better, become more knowledgeable, and actually be able to make better decisions. Do you think that with Turkey's President Erdogan, do you think if it was a brand new president, maybe only in their second or third year, that they would be just as eager to go try
there
to
is a term limit in Turkey, it's 3 years.
Okay, so
But also we have a term limit here for president, the presidential seat, and it's two terms. So, but he was talking about the Senate. And then in Turkey, they do, that's three terms that they can, they're limited to. But what he was saying, we don't have that here. So like you have a senator who's 78 years old and who's been in that seat for the last
voting on important things.
40 years. And he's kind of, okay, so we have a couple minutes. Let me, just making it personal, sometimes making it more interesting. Like I cannot make you use Twitter.
No, he's trying.
So we have a generation difference, and this is part of our job. But you use other social media channels, but not the one that I'm using, right? The thing is, it's a different time, so the generation needs it's speaking different language.
Yeah. So
even for me, who's someone up to date with technology, who's open for new things, likes changes, good changes, I'm also maybe limited to sometimes understand what two generation, like people who are 2 generation younger than me, understanding and what they need and how they live, what their expectation is. Just imagine, even my situation, I had that problem. And I wasn't criticizing you, but I accepted the fact that I couldn't change, right? Yeah. So if I make it like mandatory, I know you're going to hate it, and but you are using Instagram, right? So that means there's something changed, and maybe someone who's now 10 years younger than you are,
TikTok, right? That's what.
Yeah, so we'll never go to TikTok, right? So hopefully. So that's what the challenge is. Like right now, like even Trump at age 78, 79, running for that seat. Biden was running for that seat. Why? Like what can you do at that point? I have a father who's closer to their age, who's healthy, and he doesn't have dementia, like just like our other people have. Like he doesn't have any of those issues. He remembers everything very well, but he cannot do this job. If he was to sell one of his properties to someone, 4 kids would stop that to make sure that he is healthy enough to do that. Not because we needed that. It's just like you would be questioning, right? So people maybe more than the term limit is the age limit is what may be needed.
Yeah, if there's a minimum requirement, there may also be a maximum that you have to involve in. Yeah, because I think even a lot of the examples too, like I know you'd sent an article regarding the mortgage rates and how people are saying maybe the generations higher, like, oh, just work harder. Like when I was your age, I was able to have, a house and I already had a wife and kids and a new car and everything. But if you look at the differences on like even just inflation over the years, like even though it might have been a different interest rate back then, what the house cost to what their annual salary was, and maybe they had to work for 3 years or 4 years to afford that house, where nowadays what a salary might be for an average home price, it's like drastically different. So I think that also supports your point of different generations having different mindsets on certain issues, how it's just you're not looking for the same lens.
So we have a 91-year-old senator right now, currently. 1 out of 100 people. He's 91 years old. That's the corporation that Dr. Katz was talking about. So I know Dr. Erkan probably is waiting at the door. So we have our Bariatric Friday event, and we'll discuss the life expectancy and bariatric surgery and relationship with morbid obesity and what bariatric surgery can do. So we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Sham, thank you for joining me, and we'll be back.
Thank you.